Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Forbidden Land podcast. This is another one of those special episodes, another episode in my series on Georgia elections this year. Senator Jon Ossoff is up for re-election. And so, just like with the governor's race, I wanted to go over who's challenging him, what are Jon Ossoff's policies himself as the incumbent senator, um, you know, are the Republicans an actual threat to the senator's seat this year? If you remember 4 years ago, Raphael Warnock won his re-election after 2 years in the Senate. He won against Herschel Walker. But at the same time, Brian Kemp beat Stacey Abrams by a pretty wide margin. So, which could either show how historically unpopular Herschel Walker was, or how historically unpopular Stacey Abrams was. So this year, the Georgia governor's race is definitely more of a toss-up. I know early polling is showing that the Republicans have a lead over the Democrats in that race, but, with the primary not even having happened yet, it's kind of hard to tell. But with this race, we can get a sort of a better idea, since it seems that the Democrats are running frankly unchallenged in their primary this time around. I know there was some talk about some woman that was running for Columbus mayor that dropped out of that race to run for either governor or senator. But what thunder I just heard? But there, it doesn't really seem, from what I've researched, that it's very clear if she's even running right now. I think she's filed the paperwork, but she hasn't really campaigned a whole lot. And what I have seen of her campaign kind of sucks. So I don't think she's a real threat to the Democrats there. But Jon Ossoff is an interesting figure. Obviously, we'll go over each candidate in the primaries coming up. But we're going to start with Jon Ossoff because he's the incumbent senator. He's been a senator from Georgia since 2021. Elected during the 2020 election. And he's endorsed by Raphael Warnock, the other senator from our state. He's endorsed by the End Citizens United movement, which obviously I'm all for that. A few other things about him. He's the first senator born in the 80s, the first millennial senator. And specifically from Georgia, he's the first Jewish senator. He ran for a deep Republican district in Georgia, District 6, for the House. I actually remember this. This is how I found out who Jon Ossoff was. And while he didn't win that race, he came pretty close. He had 48% of the vote and then lost in a runoff. Which, I mean, for a deep Republican district, getting 48% of the vote isn't bad. And that district is actually now held by a Democrat. So clearly he kind of set that district up for being, for being possible to capture it for the Democrats. However, this kind of goes towards my whole, I don't support runoff elections. In Georgia, we have this special system where if none of the candidates get more than 50% of the vote, then it goes to a runoff election. Runoffs, from my experience, have always taken place about a month or two after the general election. I know in 2020, I think I voted in the runoff like within the first week of January. And I voted in that fucking runoff because I wanted to vote for Ossoff and Warnock in our state. Well, I don't really support runoff elections. Runoffs are kind of a bygone system where back in the Reconstruction era, Democrats were mad that their white supremacist candidates kept splitting the ticket. And then, progressive Republicans would then be winning elections because of that split ticket. And so they created a runoff system so that let's say a progressive wins that top of the ticket and everyone else just gets blown to bits in the election, then it goes to a runoff. So the top candidate, the top two candidates on the ballot, then go to that runoff and compete against each other. That way you can then scoop up all those votes from the other candidates that were split across and focus them all on one candidate. Now the runoffs haven't really been super effective in terms of like Raphael Warnock, because Warnock won. So the Republicans didn't really get what they wanted on that one. Runoffs in general haven't been like super effective nowadays. There have been cases throughout the state. I think even one of these candidates benefited from a runoff election where they bombed the general, but then came back and basically stole it in the runoff. And I just think that system is complete bullshit, regardless of who benefits from it. I think it's bullshit that a candidate can lose in historic numbers because their party splits the ticket, and then they just go to a runoff and then they basically take the election back. I think that system's horseshit. It's an outdated system from a dark era in the state of Georgia, and it just shouldn't exist. But yeah, so him losing in a runoff like that, yeah, complete horseshit. I think that's really stupid. And then in 2020, he defeated David Perdue for the state Senate seat. For the Senate seat for Georgia. David Perdue was the senator before him, and Perdue is, famously related to our former governor, Sonny Perdue. So he has the name recognition, and he still lost. So, kind of shows you how dog shit David Perdue was. Let's talk about his policies, his views. He voted in favor with President Joe Biden 97% of the time. You can either see that as a good thing or a bad thing. I'd say in some cases it was good, like voting on our infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bills and stuff like that. Bills that forwarded economic policy in a progressive direction. Some of the most like progressively economic bills we've had in decades, even if they were gutted heavily by Joe Manchin at the time, I still think it's good that he was voting in favor of those. But then there's stuff like voting to arm Israel. I'm not a big fan of him voting in favor of that shit. And that's the thing. I'm just going to jump straight ahead to it since I mentioned it. Jon Ossoff is a liberal Zionist. He's endorsed by J Street, which is a liberal Zionist version of AIPAC. He led a group of senators. Here's the thing. He did lead a group of Democrat senators in calling for a ceasefire in 2021. Because that's when Israel was provoking Palestinians before October 7th. They were, basically defending settlers in the West Bank and bombing temples and stuff like that. And some Democrats were calling for a ceasefire. Then he was one of the senators in 2024 to support Bernie Sanders' resolution that would block U.S. military aid to Israel. Basically aid that was, aiding the genocide in Gaza. Now, despite all of this, a year later, he would then vote to block Bernie Sanders' resolutions to block military aid and billions of dollars worth of weapons sales to Israel. So he's a bit of a flip-flopper on the topic of Israel, isn't he? On one hand, he supports a ceasefire and sending military aid, but then a year later, he's supporting sending military aid and blocking resolutions to call for a ceasefire. Very weird record on Israel. It is weird. Like, it's kind of like Kamala Harris, how she in 2019, voted against sending aid to Israel under the first Trump administration, but then in 2024. She's on stage saying, Israel has the right to defend itself. There is no genocide, blah, blah, blah. And then, we find out later that that's the exact reason she lost the election is because of her stance on Gaza. And if you think that's just leftist speculation, I'm going to talk about it more in the next episode, but there is now internal polling showing that the Democrats running on a denial of the Gaza genocide That is like one of the main, if not the sole reason that the Democrats lost the presidential election in 2024. So really weird record on Israel Jon Ossoff has. You got to watch out for that kind of stuff. I know he's been, supported by J Street, which, like I said, is the liberal AIPAC. J Street, Bernie Sanders is supported by J Street, despite all of his progressive policies and anti-Israel messaging. J Street still backs him. He still talks with at big events with J Street. And Jon Ossoff is no different. He says one thing and then does another thing. He just goes where the donor money is on that. So keep that in mind when you go to vote for him. It's why I'm kind of upset that there's no Democrat candidate running against him. No one more progressive. Because the Georgia governor race is a hotly contested race right now on the Democrat side, but nobody is trying to challenge Jon Ossoff for a Senate seat. I'm not a big fan. I feel like there should be some challenge to that. Some of his other policies is that he's in favor of banning stock trading amongst congressional members and their spouses. I'm all for that. I think the fact that congressional members and their spouses can trade stocks, I'm looking at you, Nancy Pelosi, is a huge violation. I think it should be illegal if you're in a government position of power to be trading stocks. I think it clouds your legislative judgment. I feel like it violates a lot of the clauses of, dropping your assets so you have no outside influence as a legislator. I think, it's no different than them asking Jimmy Carter to sell his peanut farm. If you want to run for Congress, you've got to sell all your stocks. That's just how it should be. Or you have to give up those assets to a trusted family member. And even that I'm weary about, because that family member, you could feel a need to assist that family member. So I feel like you should just have to give them away in general. Whether that means, selling them off and donating them to your district, like as like a charity to your district, that could be a good idea. But I think it is gross to be writing legislation, let's say about like airline regulations while having stock in Delta, or, stock in tech companies like Meta, and then voting on legislation to ban TikTok. Really weird outside influence there. I'm not a big fan of that kind of stuff, so I do support Jon Ossoff on banning stock trading for congressional members and their spouses. Really, I think that should be expanded to the entire government. If you're on the Supreme Court, if you're in Congress, if you're in the executive branch, anywhere near the federal government, like the centralized federal government, you should not be able to trade stocks. He supports legalizing weed, basically decriminalizing it on a federal level. All for it. He opposes prison time for nonviolent drug offenses. Now that's a good one. Why should you have to spend life in prison for having drugs on you? If you make the decision to do drugs, you shouldn't have to spend life in prison for having that stuff on you. I think it's ridiculous. I think the demonization of drugs is insane in this country. Should you be doing drugs? No. I don't support people doing crack. But if they are doing crack, I don't support putting them in prison for the rest of their life. That helps nobody. And all it does is breed criminal behavior, like forming gangs, drug operations, drug cartels, all that kind of stuff. All it does is just take it underground. But if you put it above board, one, that paves the way for people seeking help if they have drug addictions, paves the way for them to be put in rehab if they are caught having drugs, instead of putting them in jail. I think this country's obsession with imprisoning people for, having illegal, like illicit substances on them, I think that's insane. There's a reason why after the Reagan administration, we became the #1 country in incarcerated individuals. We have this crazy obsession with imprisoning people for nothing. We talk about this being the land of the free, but so much weird shit is illegal here. So I obviously support decriminalizing weed and, not giving prison time to nonviolent drug offenses. Now, if you're like shooting people to get crack, then sure, you should go to jail for shooting people. Duh. If you're committing domestic violence and you just so happen to have drugs on you, obviously you should go to prison for domestic violence. But I think the prison sentences for just having drugs, I think that's insane. I've never understood that. Never. You don't go to jail for having a beer. You go to jail for all the other stuff. Driving after having that beer. Having the open container in your car. Walking down the sidewalk, chugging a 40. Like, come on. You don't go to jail for just simply having alcohol. You go to jail for all the stuff you do when you've consumed that alcohol. If you do crack and then you start driving down the street like a crazy person, then yeah, you should go to jail for that. But the fact that you did the crack in the first place should, at the most, just get you sent to a rehab facility. Now, let's get to the stuff that I'm not a fan of with him. Jon Ossoff opposes defunding the police. Now, when I say defund the police, that's a horrible phrase for the actual agenda item that is. What should happen is that we reallocate funding that goes towards police departments and put them into mental health services, rehab facilities, homeless shelters, stuff like that. Anything that can help the community build itself back up. Like, you can even reallocate some of those funds to healthcare, because a lot of the main poverty drivers in this country are no access to transportation, no access to healthcare, and thus no access to a job. Those are like the core, reasons that cause poverty in this country. And so imagine we had funding in like a jobs program, mental health services for those who need it, healthcare for those who need it, temporary shelter for those who need it, so people can get back on their feet, public transportation, public transit. Why do I have to drive everywhere? Why can't I just hop on a bus and go down the road? Why do I have to drive myself everywhere? If you want the option of driving yourself everywhere, go for it, buddy. But if I want to take a bus, why can't I? Imagine we reallocated police funds into public transit, free healthcare, temporary shelter for those who can't afford shelter, mental health services. You know what I mean? What's up with that? How come we can't do any of that? Imagine if we stopped funding private prisons and put some of that funding into other stuff. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. We now know, based on recent statistics that have come out, and I'm sure we're going to see the same thing next month, where this is like the best January that New York City has had like ever. Their homicide numbers are down, their shootings are down, all of this stuff is down, and people have blamed it on like the snow. Dog, it snows in New York City almost every fucking year. Quit trying to deny reality. These are historic numbers. The police force numbers have gone down because of how many cops resigned over Mamdani's election. This stuff works. Who knew that having a hopeful mayor and a mayor that promises to bring back a decent quality of living to the city gives people hope again? Some of his policies have already led to lower crime rates. Who would have thought? So I don't understand why he's opposed to, reallocating police funding. I'm sure he's just trying to follow the Democratic Party. He is kind of a cookie cutter Democrat where he's loyal to the party. If the party tomorrow was like, we should start killing immigrants, he'd be on board immediately. And actually, that is one of the things he kind of thinks, because he voted yes on the Laken Riley Act. If you're an undocumented migrant and you commit a misdemeanor, that act authorizes ICE to come in and deal with you. And you're probably going to get deported. That's what the Laken Riley Act does. It makes being undocumented in this country a tightrope act. It makes you walk on eggshells. You get a minor traffic infraction, that enables ICE to come in and round you up and deport you. So the fact that he voted yes on the Laken Riley Act should show you that he will fall in line no matter what. No matter what the Democratic Party says, no matter how dog shit their policies become, he will vote in favor of it. He does not support abolishing ICE. He's one of those Democrats that's like, well, you know, if we just make them wear body cams and can't wear their mask anymore, then it's fine. That's what he believes in, is that instead of getting rid of the violent Nazi police force, well, you know, if we just put some safeguards up, like a body cam that they can turn off at any time, or like make them take off their masks, then it's just fine. If we can just make them do that, clearly they'll stop beating people, ignoring the fact that even like we've seen with police, if they're unmasked, they're just going to do the same shit police do. Police have body cams, and while, you know, police misconduct has definitely somewhat improved with the invention of body cams, they turn them off, they mute them, or they just do whatever the fuck they want on camera because they know the courts won't punish them for it. And also, regardless of body cams, ICE knows everyone around them is filming them on their cell phones. And they still have killed people on camera. They still shot Alex Preddy on camera. They knew everybody was filming when they shot and killed Alex Preddy. They knew people were filming when they shot and killed Renee Good. The fucking officer that killed Renee Good was fucking filming on his phone. So clearly that doesn't work. Why are we not why are we not calling for the abolishment of ICE? When undocumented immigration is simply a paperwork violation. Why are we sending a military police force onto the streets armed to the teeth, rounding these people up and putting them in camps for the simple crime of not filing the right paperwork? For basically a trespassing violation. If you're trespassing on property as an American citizen, do your local police show up armed in SWAT gear, you know, get you on your hands and knees on the ground, and then fucking kill you? In most cases, no. So why do we have a special federal militarized police force that goes in, finds people that might look undocumented, but they aren't sure if they are, and they're rounding them up and throwing them in camps on the other side of the country? Why are they doing that? Why are we spending almost as much money as Israel spends on their military for this force to come in, invade states, round people up and throw them in camps, and in that process, shooting and killing citizens? Why are we doing that? Why are we supporting that? We think a body cam is going to stop that from happening? You think them having their face showing is going to stop that from happening? We know the identities of the people involved in killing Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and nothing has happened to them. Literally nothing. They don't care. They really don't. It doesn't matter if you can see their face or not, because the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security will hold nobody accountable. And based on how these Democrats are moving in Congress, they're not going to hold them accountable either. I'm sorry for getting so worked up about this one particular topic, but it's fresh on everyone's minds right now. And it's this pussyfooting around it, this fence-sitting centrist position the Democrats keep taking on a real serious issue that the majority of Americans, by the way, feel. The majority of Americans support abolishing ICE. More Americans support abolishing ICE now than oppose it. So why is Jon Ossoff taking this weak, cowardly position? I don't know. His platform is so weird. It's the most centrist, liberal-ass platform I've ever seen. You know, he supports these small administrative changes, like the stock trading thing, or the decriminalizing of drugs, stuff like that. But then he won't go the extra mile of reallocating police funds for real material change and assistance to the bottom poverty class. He won't support abolishing a militarized, violent, illegal police force after it has clearly shown that it's incapable of acting like even a normal civil police force, which those already act up too. They're worse than the police, which is an incredible feat, by the way. So this whole campaign is built on safe positions that the Democratic Party views as safe and being weak and cowardly on the more bold positions that people actually care about in Georgia. In Georgia alone, ICE is in Atlanta. Marietta's police department just confirmed it's going to be cooperating with ICE because of a state-issued mandate. People here care about that kind of thing. I am constantly seeing people I know, friends of mine, posting where they've spotted ICE in the East Side or in downtown Atlanta or in Marietta or in fucking like Norcross. Even where I'm from, I've seen them post that they're here. So this is an issue that people care about, and they're risking losing this election to one of these fucking idiots that I'm about to talk about because they won't take a bold stance on anything. Something that the Republicans, if they are smart enough, which based on the candidate they're probably about to choose, probably not, could fucking dog walk him on those issues. The same way they dog walked the Democratic Party on the issue of immigration, because the Democrats just let them have it. How they kind of dog walked them on Israel, because they were able to present themselves as the peace party, while the Democrats, based on the way that they were being viewed by the people, looked like bloodthirsty, blood-hungry warmongers for funding a genocide. The Democratic Party is just letting these issues fall at the wayside. They're just letting the Republicans have them because they're like scared of challenging the status quo. So yeah, that's one of his dogshit positions, is he doesn't want to abolish ICE. And the last one, actually the last two, he doesn't support Medicare for all. I mean, what the fuck are we doing? I know he supports the Affordable Care Act, but objectively, the Affordable Care Act has not gone far enough. The Affordable Care Act has been on the books for like 15 years now, if not a little longer. And all it's done is put a Band-Aid over the wider issue of healthcare costs in this country, of people not being able to afford health insurance, let alone the cost of healthcare. We know the ACA is simply a temporary fix to a solution we're never going to get. And so why he doesn't support a public option like Medicare for all beats me. Beats me. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why he doesn't support that. It's such a no-brainer position. Most people support some form of a public option. If you don't support a public option, why? Do you just like paying out the ass for healthcare? Something that 40 or 50 years ago was not this expensive comparatively. So why are we okay with these Democrats not taking a bold stance on these issues that people care about? The last thing is he supports Puerto Rican statehood and DZ statehood. Why this is one of those problems that the Democratic Party has really spearheaded, I'm not sure. There is an easy solution to the DC statehood thing. Obviously, I know it. The Supreme Court would more than likely mark it as unconstitutional at this point in time. But they shouldn't be taxed the way that they are without adequate representation of voting power in the legislature. Puerto Rican statehood, I have a controversial take on that one. And then I just think we should just let Puerto Rico go and be its own nation and be independent. Puerto Rico itself has voted against statehood a couple times now. And I feel like we should let them decide if they want to be independent from the United States or not. Because the federal government has done nothing to help the Puerto Ricans. What was it, the thing? Like, they got hit by a hurricane and Donald Trump was like, we're just going to throw a big old paper towel on them. Throw some big paper towels at them, folks. We can't send them money because they'll misappropriate the funds. Like, let them vote for themselves if they want to be a state or not. Or if they'd rather be an independent nation. You know what I mean? If they want to be a state, then by all means. And then at that point, we should give them adequate federal funding and fix their shit. You know, fix the electricity problems they're having and, you know, quit giving tax incentives to white people to move there. But, you know, if they want to be an independent nation, we should let them do it. We've had their country since the late 1800s. So if they want to be an independent nation, we should let them do that. You know, we should quit making them a colony and either make them a state and part of the union or let them live on their own. So yeah, that's Jon Ossoff. Sorry for getting so fired up there. Unlike the last episode, there's just something about Ossoff where I was so hopeful for him when I voted for him the first time. You know, like when I voted for him in 2020 and 2021 in the runoff, I was so hopeful. And, you know, he's just really shown that he's not a very, he's just not a very good senator. Like, he's just one of those senators that holds the seat. He's one of those Democrats that holds the elected office, but simply just holds it to have it, to prevent the Republicans from having it. That's the same way I view Joe Biden. Joe Biden held on to the presidency simply as a 4-year delay for Trump to come back to the White House. That's how it felt. It feels like the Democrats win these offices and then they just sit on them until it's time for re-election. You know? And they don't do anything in those seats. They basically just freeze the status quo for a few years, and then they give it back up to the Republicans to continue unwinding everything and further degrading our country. So that's kind of how I view Jon Ossoff's time in the Senate in his first term. He's done some good, he's done some meh, and his views are very fence-sitting and liberal adjacent. I mean, he has some progressive ideas like on drug crimes, like on statehood for DC and Puerto Rico, but he has other bad ideas like his conservative view on police funding, on ICE, and on the Laken Riley Act, which I think he only voted yes on because he's the senator from Georgia. I think if he wasn't the senator here, he probably wouldn't have voted yes on it. But I think he thought that if he voted no, it'd be used against him in the next election. And from my point of view, it's used against him from a progressive perspective. You know, I view him not as highly anymore, that he's so willing to bend the knee to Republican capitulation. So anyway, let's move on. Let me get a sip of water before. All right. Here are the Republicans up on the ballot. First, we've got Buddy Carter. Buddy Carter is in second place. He is not related to Jimmy Carter, in case you're wondering. He's been a U.S. House of Representatives rep since 2015. He represents District 1. Like I said, he's not related to Jimmy Carter. He is a 2020 election denier. Awesome. He supported Trump when Trump was saying the election was stolen. He is heavily pro-Israel. He wants to support the president's mission to annex Greenland. Anti-gun reform. He has an A grade from the NRA. So really all around great guy. I mean, loves school shootings and hates Palestinians and loves taking over sovereign nations, and the people voted to kick this guy out of office. No, they didn't. This guy's all around a stable dude. Really represents the values of everyday Americans. He wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act based on the way that he voted on it in 2017. Because those millions of Americans with subsidized government health care, be damned. I mean, why spend less on health insurance when you could spend way more? You know what I mean? I love it when people say the ACA made health insurance prices go up. All it did was make health insurance companies go, oh, you have more money? Well, because there's no regulation about how we can jack up these prices, we're going to jack them up. Because people don't realize the government providing the ACA, all it means is that the government's footing a part of the bill. You're still paying for health insurance, but the government is now covering a piece of that cost. So it isn't like health insurance companies are getting, ripped off or stolen from. They're still getting the same amount of money. It's just that part of that money's coming from the federal government and the other part of it's coming from you. So what they're doing is jacking up the rates. So you pay the same amount you pretty much paid before, but they're getting more money because the government's still covering a piece of it. So really, it's the health insurance companies you should be blaming for that, not the ACA. He supported the 2017 Muslim ban, which, if you remember, that's when Trump first entered office and banned multiple majority Muslim countries from being able to enter the U.S. That's when ISIS was a big topic at the time, and Islamophobia was kind of at its peak right before the drop off. It had been running rampant on the internet for a while, and I think the ISIS attacks definitely made it ramp up a little bit to close to 9/11 numbers, because post 9/11 people got really Islamophobic. I think, with the rise of ISIS, it made people become a little bit more bigoted to Muslims. So at the time, Trump thought he had the mandate to block majority, I think it was 7 majority Muslim countries, if I remember correctly, from entering the U.S. And I should say the people from those countries, obviously. And eventually the federal courts blocked it because you can't just issue a travel ban with no real reason behind it. I believe you have to have some kind of national security justification that you can present the courts, but I don't think he had that. So they just reversed the decision. But it really did kind of fire off what would be a destructive, reckless, incompetent presidency, that eventually we reelected. So he supported that. Buddy Carter co-sponsored a bill that would let undocumented migrants enter the U.S. military in exchange for legal status. I was just talking about this, with people, and I was talking about how the U.S. military preys upon the poor, where they hand it to you as a viable option to get out of poverty. And they kind of prey on impoverished people so that those people will join the military and fight the rich and powerful's wars. And so they'll do all the dirty work that the rich don't want to do, that the rich don't want their sons and daughters to do. And I think the military is very predatory in that way. The military as a complex, as a industry, not when I say that, I'm not talking about the individual service members. I'm talking about the structure itself. The military industrial complex actively preys upon the poor so that they can recruit them and boost enlistment numbers. Because in their eyes, the poor are expendable. And I think it's really gross to, instead of offering undocumented migrants the ability to enter and live in the country legally, making that process streamlined or easier to accomplish, instead, we're going to, basically tempt them into enlisting in the military and doing our war imperial bidding in exchange for maybe getting legal residency status in this country. It's not even clear if they're going to get citizenship based on what I read on the bill. It seems like it's just for legal residency, which is bullshit, by the way. That it wouldn't even extend to citizenship. Would it make it easier to become a citizen? Maybe, but it's not guaranteed. And based on what we've seen in those hearings with Kristi Noem and other members of the DHS, they've been deporting people that have fought in the military but aren't citizens, so, or at least attempting to deport them. So clearly that shit's not working. But it's so predatory. It's so gross to basically be like, oh, we'll give you a big cookie if you go and die in a war in the Middle East for us so we can get oil. Thanks, guys. He's anti-sanctuary cities in Georgia, specifically in Georgia, from what I've read. He wants to test the backlog of rape kits in Georgia. Pretty good. Wow, it's like the first good thing on this list. Except he doesn't want to test the backlog of them in sanctuary cities. So how that makes any sense, I'm not really sure. You would think with a guy who constantly calls undocumented migrants violent, you would think he would want to solve rapes possibly committed by those undocumented migrants. But apparently not. You know, probably because it would probably expose the data that shows that undocumented migrants don't commit crime at nearly the same rate that citizens commit crime. So, I don't know. That, and he's also just probably a cruel, sick fuck that doesn't care about the backlog of rape kits in general and is just using it as a political talking point. He wants to ban transgender people from serving in the military. Okay. I think that's really dumb. If a transgender person wants to fight in the military, they can do that, I guess. Personally, I don't think anybody should be enlisting to continue, you know, just unfettered imperialism on the planet, especially if they're just doing it because they're poor. Come on, man. You're going to go work for the Imperial War Machine. But I think it's really dumb to explicitly exclude a demographic of people from serving. It's really stupid. I mean, this just echoes back to the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era when gay people were frowned upon from serving in the military. It really does just harken back to that. So, he has a weird track record on states' rights. States' rights, right? Because they all pretend to be pro-states' rights, but then the moment they want to do federal overreach on something that's horrible, they do it. And so he is pro-life. He supported the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. And he states that it's to bring the issue back to the states. I suppose that is a pro-states' rights position he's taking. Although I guarantee you, if there was legislation proposed to ban abortion nationwide, he would probably vote yes on it. He opposed a bill that would have been included in the 2023 Farm Bill that basically would have eliminated state regulations from applying to farmed goods crossing over state borders. I know it sounds really complicated. It's basically because he opposed it. Opposing it means that state regulations will hold up when produce and farmed, goods are brought across state borders. So if you want to farm something and then bring it into California, you have to follow California state regulations surrounding farming. Would I support a nationwide regulation on farming so that way it's not so different across the country? Probably. I would probably want to mimic whatever California's got going on. But, I suppose it's a good thing we didn't just do away with state farming regulations without having a national one in general. But here's where he's not pro states' rights. He's against the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. This bill decriminalizes weed on a federal level and allows states to enact their own laws. Now, I don't agree with the states enacting their own laws on it. I think it should be decriminalized nationwide and stay that way. I don't think states should be allowed to make weed illegal anymore. I think it should just be legalized nationwide permanently. However, this bill specifically allows states to enact their own laws on weed. And Buddy Carter is against that. So he's not pro states' rights when it comes to marijuana. So what's up with that? Really, all it shows is that when Republicans say that they are pro states' rights, it's just a talking point to them. Because if the moment arises where they can enact federal legislation to overwrite liberal policies in other states, they'll do it in a heartbeat because they don't care. They've always used states' rights as a scapegoat. You ask them why the Civil War started, they'll say it's states' rights. And the reason being is because they don't want to admit it was over slavery. And when you say states' rights to do what, they have no answer. It's because they wanted the states to be able to decide if they can have slavery or not. So, states' rights to them is just a talking point. It's not a legitimate position that they actually hold. Very evident by the, Marijuana Opportunity Act. Very indicative of that decision. All right, let's move to the top front runner of the race, who is polling right now at 36%. And that is Mike Collins. Mike Collins is a House representative from District 10. You'll remember that he's the representative over Appalachia High School. I said quite a lot of things about him in my podcast episode about that school shooting. Because it hit deep with me. I dedicated a whole episode to it because I was pissed off that, we had yet another school shooting in this country, another very deadly one. And Mike Collins ran on a whole bunch of pro-gun shit where he's just rubbing it in your face. This is what I'm going to do when I get to Congress. And he's just shooting shit with his gun. His fetishization of firearms is gross. And it leads to that kind of culture where kids go, this is the only way I've been taught to solve my problems. No problem can't be solved. No problem can go unsolved with a gun. The kids like that are taught that if something's going wrong at school or anything in their life is going wrong, they can solve that problem with a firearm. And so, him being a part of that culture is exactly what breeds school shootings like that. And if elected to the Senate, he's going to bring that ideology to the Senate. He's endorsed by Turning Point USA. Wow. Shocker. What a surprise. He's endorsed by, real just all around great human being, shining example of a great man who really just fully displays conservative family values. Newt Gingrich. If you know who Newt Gingrich is, you'll understand why I said all that shit before I said his name, but good Lord, that is like the last guy I would want to endorse me. I would be renouncing his endorsement the moment I got it. Because holy shit, what a guy to endorse you is fucking Newt Gingrich, dude. He's also a 2020 election denier. In fact, he was way more involved in denying the 2020 election than Buddy Carter was. Mike Collins, you'll learn during this, is very unhinged. Like, lots of screws loose. This guy is fucking crazy. And on one hand, I'm kind of glad he might become the Republican candidate because he looks fucking bonkers and nuts. He's like a Herschel Walker figure. But the thing that makes him a little bit more effective than Herschel Walker is the fact that he's already a state representative. Like, he's already a rep in the House. So he has government experience, unlike Herschel Walker, who falsely claimed he was in the fucking FBI or something and hunted someone down with a gun in his hand. But Mike Collins is probably just as fucking crazy as Herschel Walker was. So he's still a legitimate threat to the Democrats, but he looks a lot more unhinged than someone like Buddy Carter. Buddy Carter would be a legitimate threat to the Democrats because he looks a lot more sane and put together than Mike Collins does. He got into some shit because he hired someone named Brandon Phillips as his chief of staff. Phillips is quite the interesting guy. He was arrested in 2022 for animal cruelty because he kicked a dog. He also pled guilty to criminal trespassing and battery after attacking a man and slashing his tires, then throwing a woman's laptop. All this happened in 2008. He has also a past of pulling a gun on a random woman. Great guy. And after all that, Mike Collins goes, "You should be my chief of staff." Mike Collins seems to kind of have a history of hiring terrible people to be on his staff. I kind of split his policies up by domestic and foreign because, you know, he's got a bit more of a Republican reactionary, you know, history than Buddy Carter kind of does. Buddy Carter's not a big figure in the Republican Party compared to Mike Collins. Mike Collins is like one of the faces of the modern Republican Party. I'm pretty sure he's part of the Freedom Caucus in the House. So he's up there with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. He voted to attempt to impeach Joe Biden. He wanted to formalize the impeachment proceedings against Joe Biden in 2023, and also called for Pete Buttigieg to either be impeached or resign. He only did this because Republicans were gaining control in the House. It's the only reason he did this. That's why I said he's one of those crazy MAGA Freedom Caucus freaks. Because you would think like, oh, Biden can be impeached for legitimate things, right? But he wasn't trying to impeach Biden for anything legit. He was trying to impeach Biden for like stupid reactionary partisan politics. He voted against the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, a bill that ended up suspending the debt ceiling until 2025. So basically, he tried to plunge this country into debt because we were hitting the debt ceiling. He would have basically grinded our government to a halt because we were going to hit the debt ceiling. Now, that's a bunch of like government garbage right there. Obviously, the debt doesn't matter to everyday people like us. But the fact that he voted no on that is kind of funny because I'm pretty sure he was part of a minority of House members that voted no on that. He's the architect who introduced the Lake and Riley Act in the House. So him and Jon Ossoff, brothers in arms on that one. He suggested that a migrant who allegedly attacked a police officer be executed. This man would soon be cleared by the Manhattan District Attorney. But still, Collins said on Twitter, quote, "A ticket on Pinochet Air for a free helicopter ride back," end quote. This is in reference to Augusto Pinochet, who was the leader of Chile, who used to fly people out on something called death flights. And you can kind of infer the rest from that. He is pro-life. He supports the abortion restrictions in Georgia and supports the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. So he'd be bringing that to the Senate. He would be an automatic no. on codifying Roe v. Wade. If the Democrats ever fucking got around to doing that, by the way. He currently is being investigated because of a complaint filed in the House Ethics Committee against him. So that's cool. He's being investigated by the House Ethics Committee. Said that the bishop who basically kind of chastised Donald Trump on Inauguration Day last year, he said that the U.S.-born bishop should be deported for what she said to the president. And then he's also pro-January 6th insurrection. I'm pretty sure he jokingly called it on Twitter a peaceful, unauthorized tour of Congress. So he's just, like I said, he's one of those fucking nutbags, man. One of those fucking nutbags. On foreign policy, he voted in favor of removing troops from Syria. It's probably like the only good thing I've read on this list. However, despite wanting to remove troops from Syria, he is pro-Israel. You'll remember this famous image of the AIPAC tracker tracking the fact that he was paid $9.44 from AIPAC. Obviously that number's gone up. He isn't still just being paid a fucking McRib to support Israel's, genocide in Gaza. He's not just being paid a fucking McRib. Sandwich only, no fries, no drink. Just the sandwich. But the fact that this is even a real thing. I just love that this picture exists. It's like one of my favorite things to tell people. Is that this motherfucker got paid $9. He got paid $9 from AIPAC. And they reported on it. Why would he accept that? Why would he accept $9 and report it? Oh, it's so funny. This motherfucker sold out our country for a fucking Big Mac. Oh, I just love it. I love it, dude. Obviously, he doesn't have that anymore. He he's made a lot more money since then. His current AIPAC total is is $20,000 now, which still is not a lot, by the way. Like, fucking Jon Ossoff is making $715,000 from J Street and various other AIPAC adjacent lobbyists. So why is Mike Collins settling for 20 grand? Like, he sold out the country to buy like a new car in cash. That's about how much I paid for my car. So why is he only accepting 20 grand from AIPAC? That's so funny. This is your potential future senator selling out the nation for like 2 years of college, like a cheap college. He's cheap as fuck. This is all he'll accept to start passing Israeli legislation. Like, damn. Even the $9 is insane. The fact that he took only $9 and like, immediately reported it. Like, what the fuck? He only took $9. He's one of the lowest earners on this list. He is the lowest earner on this list. Look at that. Everybody else has gotten way more money from AIPAC to support Israel. And this cheap bastard is selling out your country for 20 grand. Now, I think it's wrong to take any money to support Israel. In fact, I think it's wrong to support Israel in general. But it should tell you something that, like, Buddy Carter is taking almost 70 grand to support Israel. You understand that people have, holy shit, she's getting a lot of money. People have, this greedy, inherent urge to take bribes. That's what a lot of these people have. The people that don't take AIPAC money are commendable. But when you're being offered like 700 grand from J Street to push pro-Israel policy, if you don't have a strong moral compass, you'll probably accept that money. That's a shitload of money. But to only accept $20,000 and that's enough? This dude's a cheap motherfucker. He can be bought and paid for by anyone. I could probably afford to pay him off. So, yeah, this guy, complete clown. Like, it's crazy he'll sell out the country for such a low amount of money. But so will Jon Ossoff. He'll sell out the country for a pretty substantial check. You give him enough money, he'll support Israel no matter what. God, dude, the $9 thing is so funny. Oh, jeez. He is pro sending weapons to Taiwan, which... Can we leave Taiwan alone, man? Is that really something we should even be concerning ourselves with, is the Chinese taking Taiwan? Something that even people in Taiwan are like, sure. The chances of Chinese invasion of Taiwan are pretty slim right now. It's probably going to be a long time before they even think about doing that. Because I think they're in sort of like a cold agreeance of, like, they know they're kind of considered part of China, but right now they're being somewhat left alone. So they're just kind of in this in-between place of like, can we quit rocking the boat, please? You know, like, why are we doing that? Why are we fucking with them? He is anti-sending military aid to Ukraine. So he's pro-Russia, which is actually kind of shows a lot of moral consistency there. He loves Israel and he loves Russia, two countries who are both pummeling a weaker population just because they can. You know, launching a military campaign against two populations because they believe that land should belong to them. Israel in its case is destroying the Palestinians, who are virtually unarmed at this point, and committing genocide against. They're trying to ethnically cleanse that land because they want it. They want the land. They don't care about who's living there. The Russians are using the people of Ukraine as a weapon, basically as saying, no, those people are Russian. They're Russian like us. You know, we're just trying to save them from the Nazis. If they could wipe out all of the Ukrainians and take Ukraine, they would take the land and kill all the Ukrainians. They probably would. And probably keep some of the Russian sympathizers. The only difference there is that we are militarily supporting Ukraine against Russia, but we're also supporting Israel in their conquest to genocide the Palestinians. So, I guess Mike Collins is a little consistent there, supporting imperial powers. And last but not least, this is one of the reasons why I call him a crackpot. Because he doesn't even have necessarily the full support of the Georgia State Legislature, right? In the sense that he got heavily criticized for doing this next thing I'm about to show you. He made an AI-generated ad on Jon Ossoff.
Now at 6, at first glance, this might look like a real ad campaign from U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff. It is not. It is actually artificial intelligence, a likeness of the senator made by his Republican opponent, Congressman Mike Collins. The ad is raising questions about the use of AI in campaign politics. Political reporter Doug Reardon joining us. And Doug, some people are against it, others for it.
Right. You could probably guess who. Now, to be clear, Collins did not violate any laws by doing this, but some voters and even some other politicians are worried about the morality of using fake videos of real people on the campaign trail. The figure in this video looks like Senator Jon Ossoff.
It's Senator Jon Ossoff.
He sounds like Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff.
They say it'll hurt farmers, but I wouldn't know. I've only seen a farm on Instagram.
But it's not Jon Ossoff. His campaign opponent for his Senate seat, Georgia Congressman Mike Collins, made the ad using AI technology. Do you think it's ethical to be putting that out there for people when they may not be able to tell the difference?
Technology is always changing. Campaigns are always changing, and we're just embracing the same thing that everybody else and campaigns are out.
You know, if campaigns are always changing, why don't we just send the Pinkertons after one of the candidates and threaten them to drop out of the race? Oh, right. We have rules about that kind of thing. This is why I support that there should be rules about using AI in campaigns. There should be FEC rules about using AI against your opponents in a political campaign. There just should be. It should not be right to, because one, it's defamation, but it's hard to prove defamation when you're a public figure. So I think it should be illegal to, because you're basically deceiving voters. You're deceiving them. Like, way more than you were before. Candidates get up on stage and they go, I'm going to do good things for you. And then they get in office and they basically pass the fuck you act and the kill all poor people act. That's what they end up doing. But to deceive them on the campaign trail like this with AI generated content, because your positions are so dog shit, you've got to lie about the other candidate saying shit that they didn't say. You're a fucker. You shouldn't be able to do that. You should be fined heavily for that. And if you keep violating it, you go to jail. You're invalidated from the election at that point. You know, that there should be a campaign law and regulation around AI generated content.
They're doing.
Collins tells me other politicians, even the White House, use AI, but the ad has raised some ethical concerns.
The White House uses AI because they're all cut from the same cloth that you are. The moron fucker cloth of just idiots who are barely running the federal government right now. All these guys who have like zero governmental experience or just simply don't care and are running wild with zero accountability. That's why they're using AI, because they don't care. No one's going to hold them accountable for doing that.
About how far is too far.
Well, from the video, you can tell that it's a deep fake.
Jimmy Schaap is a Georgia
Not
voter
really.
and computer technology teacher with Atlanta Public Schools. He said to a keen eye, you can spot the difference, but many voters don't have that same scrutiny.
Exactly.
The first thing I thought was there's going to be a lot of the electorate that aren't going to recognize this as a deep fake. Not a voter's job to know the difference between a real and a fake video.
Even Georgia lawmakers expressed concern over this very issue last legislative session when they introduced a bill tethering criminal charges to deepfake videos meant to intentionally mislead the public.
The Ossoff video, to me, is clearly a satire.
State Representative Brad Thomas, the sponsor of the House bill, also endorsed Collins against Ossoff. He felt with the
What's the point? Oh, I sponsored this bill that would outlaw people being able to do this. Oh, but that tiny little watermark in the corner?
small watermark on the video.
Oh, that's fine. That's good enough. Dude, you know how many people I know that show me AI videos that have the watermark on them and they go, can you believe that's real? They don't read. They don't pay attention to shit like this.
It was clear enough to anyone who watched it.
If there's a clear stamp on it that says this is AI generated, then I don't always love it, but it's okay. You know, we're going to have to accept that as part of the political process.
And more on that bill in just a sec. Ossoff's campaign did respond to the ad. They told us, quote, the only reason a candidate would need to use a deep fake to make up an opponent's words and manipulate a video to deceive Georgians is if they didn't think they could win on their own. Georgians don't take well to people who lie to them, unquote. And again, that Georgia bill.
But see, if they don't know that they're being lied to, that's the whole point. You know, this state has clearly proven that it will flip blue if it needs to, unlike Alabama and Mississippi and South Carolina and Florida and Tennessee, which are all states that have basically locked themselves in now as being Republican strongholds in the South. Georgia has clearly proven that it is willing to flip blue if it has to. And if you're actively deceiving them and lying to them in a way where they'll never know, that's a problem. That is an actual problem.
Includes penalties for deepfake videos that do not include those disclaimers when they are posted 90 days out from an election. Obviously, we are a very long way away from that time frame. Ossoff's team, again, very perturbed by this. The Democratic Party of Georgia also called it low integrity on the part of Collins. Guys, back to you.
Oh, they heavily had a lot of words to say about, That's such a classic Democrat response. You know what I mean? Oh, the Democrats had a lot to say about that one. Oh. The fuck, man. Anyway, here's the last candidate. Jeez. Here's the last candidate in the lineup. This guy is not really much to worry about, I guess, because he entered the race, but he's not really a good candidate at all. So, like, even for Republican standards. Derek Dooley, a former Tennessee football coach. He's entered the race. He is endorsed by the governor of Georgia and his wife. So weird, by the way. So strange.
Today, Governor Brian Kemp officially announced who he's supporting in Georgia's 2026 U.S. Senate race. Former football coach Derek Dooley. 11 Alive's political team's Zach Merchant was there when this happened.
We'd reported it was likely to happen. Now it is official. Today in Athens, Governor Brian Kemp formally endorsed Derek Dooley for U.S. Senate.
I thought this race was really suited for a political outsider. And I didn't know who that was going to be, but we know who that is now. And Derek has my full support.
Dooley, a former college football coach and son of Georgia coaching legend Vince Dooley, enters the Republican primary as a political newcomer.
All right, I spent a 3-decade career working with people from all walks of life. And I can tell you in the locker room right now, right down the road, it doesn't matter what your race is, what your income level is, what your politics is, what your religion is. All right, it was about bringing people together, finding some common ground, and creating hope and opportunity for them every day.
Kemp chose to support Dooley over two other more seasoned Republican lawmakers in the race. Representative
God, I can just feel the Georgia warm, humid heat in that clip. Holy shit. There's like something about that. And his accent. I hate the Republicans, but my God, there's like something weirdly comforting about that. You know
Mike Collins
I mean?
and Buddy Carter both responded to the endorsement. Collins criticized Dooley's Republican bona fides and said if he's the nominee, the base will not show up, the low-propensity Trump voters will stay home, and Jon Ossoff will win again. A Carter campaign spokesperson said Saturday, there's only one endorsement that matters in Georgia, and with all due respect, it ain't this one.
Damn. Mike Collins said, I don't know if Dooley's really cut out to be the candidate. Dude, Buddy Carter going, you know, Brian Kemp, who gives a fuck what Brian Kemp has to say about that? Damn, dude. That's kind of cold. Yeah, way to never get endorsed by the governor now. Jesus. Dude, Brian Kemp is a moderate Republican. He's not always on board with what Trump does. There's a reason why, Trump was endorsing David Perdue over Kemp in the 2022 governor primaries. There's a reason for that. It's because they don't always see eye to eye. But moderate Georgia Republican voters always turn out for Brian Kemp. And so if the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who's still somewhat popular in the state, comes out and doesn't endorse you, and then you say his endorsement doesn't matter, dog, come on. You're throwing it away. You just completely fucked your moderate vote. But I do think it's really weird to endorse a football coach outsider as the candidate. I was genuinely shocked when I read that he endorsed Dooley.
In Georgia Republican politics, two endorsements matter the most. The first is Governor Kemp's. The other is President Trump's. President Trump has not yet weighed in this race.
Dude, he's
the winner of the GOP
Mike
primary
Collins.
will go on to face incumbent Democratic U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff in 2026. In Athens, Zach Merchant, 11 Alive News.
He's going to endorse Mike Collins more than likely, or he'll see the writing on the wall and not issue an endorsement. Because so far, everyone that Trump endorses is like marked with the mark of Cain. Like, it's kind of nuts. Everyone that he endorses just drops off in the elections, in the polling. It's kind of the mark of death. He literally has the Midas touch if it meant killing campaigns instead of turning stuff to gold. The other weird thing about Derek Dooley is he is not voted in what he says is nearly 2 decades. He didn't vote for Trump in 2016. He didn't vote in 2020. Like, he just didn't vote. Very weird. Why would you run for Senate if you've never participated, or at least haven't participated in the democratic process in 20 years or so? Very strange track record there. But yeah, that's Derek Dooley, you know. I mean, what is there even to say about him? He doesn't have a chance, to be honest. So the race will probably come down to Jon Ossoff and Mike Collins. Yeah, I can't imagine it's gonna be Buddy Carter, if I'm being real here. So, you know, go out to the polls in the primary, which is in May, and make sure you vote for the candidate you want to vote for. I'm probably going to vote for Jon Ossoff because he's the only fucking candidate on the ballot. That or I'll write somebody in. I don't know. I'll probably write somebody in. I know that I'm going to go vote for the Georgia governor primary. So while I'm there, I guess I should probably write in a candidate for the Senate. But it's probably going to be Jon Ossoff as the candidate, obviously, because there's no one running against him. And it'll probably be Mike Collins. Unless something changes in the next 3 months, it's going to be Mike Collins. And Mike Collins has got a lot of screws loose, but I fear that the Democrats' complacency and centrism is going to really hurt them in this election. It's making what should be a dog walk, what should be like, you know, an easy election to win against a nutcase. It's making it an unnecessary uphill battle. So, you know, we'll see in November who ends up becoming the next Georgia state or, you know, Georgia U.S. senator. Maybe we'll be a purple state if Ossoff loses and we got a Democrat in Warnock and a Republican in Collins. I hope not. But, you know, the Democrats got to get their shit together, man. They're making this race unnecessarily difficult for Jon Ossoff. And he's not doing himself any favors either. So, all right. If you want to support this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/forbiddenlandpod. You can subscribe and, you know, watch some of the bonus content, or just support the podcast. There's some low dollar tiers, like $1 or $3, I think, that are just to, you know, throw a couple bucks my way for like a coffee or whatever. Not that coffee's that cheap anymore. But, you know, there's a $6 tier that gets you the bonus content. So go check that out. And if you want to listen to this podcast on other platforms, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, I think, for some reason. Samsung Smart Fridge, maybe? You know, the one with like the bespoke AI in it or whatever. Ugh. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll see y'all in the next episode. Peace.